I live alone, but every Friday at midnight, I hear someone knocking from inside my basement. The first time it happened, I was lying in bed, half asleep, when a thump, thump, thump echoed through the silence. My eyes flew open, heart pounding in my throat. At first, I told myself I must have imagined it. Houses make all kinds of noises at night, especially old ones like mine. Perhaps it was just the plumbing or the ancient furnace kicking on. I pulled the blankets up to my chin, trying to ignore the prickling feeling that someone unseen was listening just beneath the floorboards. That was 1 week ago. Tonight is Friday again, and the knocking has returned. It started as a faint tap, tap, tap at exactly 12 a.m., as if on cue with the grandfather clock in the hall chiming the hour. I was wide awake this time, anticipating it, dreading it. The sound is too deliberate, too steady to be pipes or settling wood. It's coming from the basement door at the end of the downstairs hallway. From my bedroom upstairs, I can hear it clearly, a patient, almost polite knocking, as if something down there is asking to be let out. On trembling legs, I leave my bed and creep halfway down the stairs, stopping where I can peek toward the back of the house. The door that leads to the basement sits in shadow. It's an old, heavy door of painted wood. I left it closed and locked, of course, I always do. Now, in the gloom, I see the door trembling ever so slightly as 3 slow knocks shake it on its hinges. The sound reverberates through the dark hall, each knock deep and oddly hollow. I grip the railing, knuckles white. My mouth has gone dry. "Who's there?" I manage to call out, my voice a brittle whisper. There is no answer, just silence, and then a scraping scratch as if something sharp dragged across the inside of the door. A whimper catches in my throat. Every instinct screams to run back to my room and hide under the covers, to pretend I never heard anything, but I can't take my eyes off that basement door quivering in the dark. After what feels like an eternity, the knocking stops. The door falls still. Only the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen breaks the quiet. I wait, frozen on the stairs, straining to hear any further noise from below. Nothing. Minutes tick by. At last, I exhale a long, shaky breath and tiptoe back to my bedroom as lightly as possible. I leave the hall light on, its weak yellow glow spilling down to the landing, a feeble barrier against whatever lurks below. It takes hours for me to fall asleep, ears tuned for the slightest sound. By morning, in the safety of daylight, I almost convince myself it was all imagined. In the rational brightness of late Saturday morning, the idea of someone or something knocking from inside my locked basement seems absurd. I even laugh at myself a little as I pour coffee. Probably some pressure in the pipes or a raccoon that got into a crawl space. I should go check the basement today, I think, just to put my mind at ease. Cup of coffee in hand, I walk down the main floor hallway to the basement door. Sunlight slants through the kitchen window, chasing away the shadows of last night. Everything appears ordinary. But when I reach for the basement doorknob, I find it unlocked. I halt, heart lurching. I know I locked it. I always do. How? The metal knob is cold under my fingers. Slowly, I swing the door open. The wooden stairs leading down are revealed, descending into darkness. A dank, musty smell wafts up, the stale odor of earth and old wood mixed with something like wet stone. I fumble for the light switch just inside. With a loud click, a single naked bulb hanging from the ceiling flickers on, casting long shadows across the basement below. I call out, "Hello?" My voice dies, absorbed by the basement's concrete walls. No reply. Steeling myself, I start down the steps. The wood planks creak under each cautious footfall. I note the slight give of the third step, the one that always sags a bit. Halfway down, the air grows noticeably colder and the smell of mildew strengthens. I reach the bottom and hold the handrail tightly, sweeping my gaze across the basement. The weak light from the swaying bulb reveals the clutter I've stored down here since moving in. Cardboard boxes piled against one wall, an old washer and dryer set in one corner, a rusty water heater by the far wall. The small ground-level windows are caked with grime, allowing only slivers of daylight. Dust motes float in the air, disturbed by my presence. Everything is still. Nothing appears out of place. Yet I feel intensely that I am not alone. It's the feeling you get in a dark room, sensing someone right behind you just before you whip around to find nobody there. My skin prickles, and a drop of sweat trails down my back despite the chill. I clear my throat. "Is anyone here?" I say softly, embarrassed by how frightened I sound. Silence. Gathering courage, I walk slowly around, peering behind the furnace and the stacked boxes. A spider scuttles away across the concrete floor. In the far corner, I find nothing but an old tarp draped over some unused furniture. Everything is normal, except I realize with a fresh jolt of unease that the basement window on the east wall is wide open. It's one of those small hopper windows near the ceiling. I rush to close it. Had I left this open? I seldom come down here, and I certainly wouldn't leave a window gaping open in the winter cold. A chill wind must have blown in during the night, I reasoned, maybe causing the door to rattle? Perhaps. I pull the latch shut and hurry back upstairs, glad to escape the clammy basement air. I lock the basement door firmly behind me. Maybe the open window was the simple answer I wanted. Still, I double-check the lock twice before leaving it. The week passes in relative peace. I work from home and my days are quiet. By midweek, I've managed to push the bizarre incident to the back of my mind. It's not until Thursday night that I feel that old coil of dread tightening in my stomach. Tomorrow is Friday. I find myself constantly glancing toward the basement door as evening approaches, my nerves on edge. Sure enough, at midnight on Friday, I'm lying in bed reading when a familiar knock, knock, knock reverberates through the house. This time, it's louder, more insistent. The sound seems to rattle up from the floorboards themselves. I bolt upright, heart hammering. 3 distinct knocks, one after the other, slow and solid. And then, to my horror, the door creaks open. I can hear the soft groan of the hinges echo downstairs. I know I locked that door. I know I did. Yet when I peer out of my bedroom, I see it swinging gently ajar. In the pale beam of the nightlight plugged in down the hall, I can just make out a tall, dark shape at the top of the basement stairs, a human-like silhouette. For a split second, relief washes over me. Is it a person? Has someone broke it in? That at least would be something understandable, tangible. "Who are you?" I shout, voice cracking with panic and bravado. The figure at the basement door jerks its head toward me. The way it moves is wrong. A sudden jolting motion, like a puppet yanked on strings. My blood turns to ice. I reach blindly for the light switch on the wall and flick it on. The hallway floods with light. There's no one there. The doorway is empty, the door now standing fully open, yawning blackness beyond. I gasp, adrenaline pounding in my ears. Did I imagine the silhouette? I can't tell what's real. The basement light is off. I realize I must have left it lit after my morning inspection, but now it's dark. Gathering every ounce of courage, I force myself down the stairs once more, gripping a heavy flashlight in one hand and my phone in the other, thumb poised to call 911. I reach the bottom. The flashlight's beam cuts through the thick shadows. The basement looks as it did earlier, silent and undisturbed. I edge forward, sweeping the light into every corner. The hairs on my arms stand up as I approach the center of the room. Something is off. It takes a moment to realize what it is. The old rocking chair in the corner is now turned to a different direction. When I was down here earlier, I'm certain it was turned toward the wall. I remember because I noted its faded floral cushion. Now it's turned toward the stairs, as if something down there was sitting watching the door. I swallow hard. On the floor by the chair, I spot a dark stain. My beam lingers on it. Is that wetness? A puddle of water maybe, except it's not clear. It's faintly brownish red. Rust from the pipes? I lean down and tentatively sniff. The coppery tang that hits my nose leaves me lightheaded with fear. It's blood. As I straighten up, something scratches in the darkness behind me. I whirl around, heart in my throat, shining the light towards the noise. Nothing but the concrete wall and the washing machine. The scratching comes again from above.
I tilt the flashlight up just in time to see long fingertips, impossibly long, pale and contorted, slip out of sight above a support beam near the ceiling. They were curling back as if something hunched on the rafters had just crawled out of view. That is enough. I turn and sprint up the creaking stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Behind me, I hear a heavy thud on the floor and a skittering scrape as if something dropped down and is scrambling across the concrete after me. I choke back a scream. As soon as I barrel through the basement door, I slam it shut and twist the deadbolt with trembling hands. Something bangs against the other side. Once, twice. The entire door quivers in its frame under an enormous weight. I stumble backwards, eyes glued to the door. The banging stops, replaced by the soft, insistent knock, knock, knock once more. Polite, almost mocking.
I never had a reason to fear my next-door neighbor until I saw him in his basement at midnight, methodically banging his head against a wooden post. Before that night, Mr. Conway had always been a polite, quiet presence on our street. I'd smile and wave at him while mowing the lawn or picking up mail, and he'd nod and give a friendly, if reserved, greeting. For 6 months since I moved in, I never had any reason to be uneasy about him, until everything changed one cold Friday. It was nearly midnight, and I was taking out the garbage late. A soft glow flickered in the windows of my neighbor's basement, visible through the hedges separating our yards. It struck me because Mr. Conway, that's his name, a pale, lanky fellow in his 50s, usually went to bed early. Well, here he was in his basement at midnight with the lights dancing. I could hear a faint sound, too, a muffled, rhythmic thumping carrying through the cold autumn air. Curious, I paused by my trash bins and peered through the leaves. The basement window was half open. Through the grimy glass, I caught a glimpse of Mr. Conway. He was standing near the center of his basement, illuminated by a single swaying bulb. His back was to the window, but I could see his silhouette outlined in that sickly light. He seemed to be shaking or convulsing slightly. The strange thumping noise was clearer now, a dull thud, 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 in a steady pulse. It took me a moment to realize the sound was coming from Mr. Conway himself. He was banging his head against one of the support beams in the basement over and over with that same slow rhythm. I froze, trash bag in hand, not quite believing what I was seeing. Was he hurt? Having some kind of seizure? But the motion was too deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. His head knocked against the wood beam methodically. I wanted to call out to him or go knock on his door to see if he was all right, but a prickling fear rooted me in place. There was something deeply wrong about the way he moved. Even from behind, I sensed an unnatural stiffness in his posture, as if his joints bent at odd angles. After a few more horrible seconds of watching my neighbor quietly slam his skull into a post, I couldn't take it anymore. I took an uncertain step forward and cleared my throat. "Mr. Conway? Everything okay?" I called softly across the yard. The thumping stopped. His head lifted. He turned slowly toward the window, toward me, though his face was still hidden in shadow. For a moment we both stood there, the distance between us feeling like a yawning void. I had the distinct impression that he was looking at me, even though I couldn't make out his eyes. A tremor of fear shot through me. Then, without a word, Mr. Conway moved out of sight. One moment his form was there in the window, and the next he stepped back and melted into the darkness of his basement. The light went out. I was left staring at my own wary reflection in the now black window. Heart hammering, I hurried back inside, abandoning the trash bag by the bins. I double-locked my door and spent a restless night replaying what I'd seen. Maybe I imagined it. Or maybe Mr. Conway was sleepwalking or having a mental breakdown. I even considered that I had simply misinterpreted some mundane action. I resolved to check on him the next day, just in case. On Saturday morning, I walked next door and knocked, feeling a little nervous. After a long moment, the door creaked open and Mr. Conway peered out. He looked like himself, mild-mannered, tidy, with his wire-framed glasses and a cardigan despite the warming weather.
There was a small bruise on his forehead just above his left eyebrow. When he saw me, he gave a thin, polite smile. "Oh, hello there. Can I help you?" I began to wonder if I'd truly imagined everything. "Hi, I just wanted to check in. I thought I heard a noise from your place last night. Are you all right?" I tried to keep my tone light. He blinked behind his glasses, and for an uncomfortable stretch of silence, he just stood there, blocking my view inside. Finally, he replied, "Noise? I was asleep early. Maybe you heard the old furnace. It acts up sometimes." His voice was calm, pleasant even. If I hadn't seen otherwise with my own eyes, I would have accepted that answer without a second thought. As it was, I felt a slight chill. His gaze was fixed unblinkingly on my face. I forced a laugh. Could be. Those old houses, right? Well, glad everything's okay." He nodded slowly and said, "Appreciate your concern. Have a good day now," in a tone that was certainly a polite dismissal. I stepped back, and he gently shut the door. I was left standing on his porch with a stomach full of doubts. The encounter felt odd. His responses were perfectly normal, yet something in his eyes as he answered, a glint of coldness, or perhaps just my own paranoia, made me feel that he knew exactly what I was referring to and wanted me to drop it. I walked home, telling myself I'd let it go. Maybe he really was just sleepwalking or in need of help. If it happened again, I decided, I'd call someone, his relatives if he had any, or a non-emergency line. I tried to put the incident out of my mind. The week passed quietly. By Thursday, I'd almost managed to convince myself it was none of my business. But as Friday evening approached, I found myself unable to relax. I kept glancing out my window at Mr. Conway's house next door. His car was in the driveway. I hadn't seen him leave all day. Around 11 p.m., I saw that a light had come on in his living room. Through my upstairs window, I could partially see into it. He was sitting in his armchair, perfectly still, just staring straight ahead at a blank TV screen, not even pretending to watch anything, just staring. The room's lights were off except for the flicker of the TV's standby glow and a single lamp, so it was hard to tell for sure, but he remained in that same position for a disturbingly long time. At some point past 11:30, I must have looked away or dozed off. A motion sensor light outside snapped me awake, the one above Mr. Conway's back door. I got up and peered out cautiously. Mr. Conway was walking out into his backyard, headed for the little storm doors that led down to his basement from outside. He was carrying something over his shoulder, a long rolled-up object, like a rug or a tarp-wrapped bundle. My pulse quickened. The night was moonless dark, but the floodlight over his door cast harsh white onto the grass. I could see him fairly clearly. He dragged the bundle to the storm cellar doors and unlatched them. His movements looked stiff, heavy. I remembered the unnatural way he had banged his head the week before, and a shudder went through me. Quietly, I slid my window a few inches to hear better. A faint metallic squeal came from the hinges as he opened the basement access. Mr. Conway heaved the bundle, and it thumped down the steps into the earth. He then descended after it, disappearing from view into the below-ground stairwell. The backyard went quiet and still. I didn't know what to do. That bundle, I had a horrible thought that it might be a body. It was roughly human-sized. Was I witnessing my neighbor disposing of a murder victim? My rational brain fought against the idea. It could have been anything. Old carpet, a deer he hit with his car, though I hadn't heard any mention of that. But who carries something like that into their basement at midnight on Friday? I grabbed my phone and with trembling fingers dialed 911. My mind raced. Should I report a possible break-in? Suspicious activity? I wasn't sure what to even tell the police. As I hesitated, my eyes locked on the faint glow now emanating from those open storm doors. The basement light was on again. In that glow, a shape moved. I realized Mr. Conway had come back up to the threshold of the storm doors, and he was looking right at me. Even across the dark expanse between us, I could feel his stare. I must have been visible in my lit window. My heart lurched into my throat as I ducked away, clumsy with fear. I fumbled to turn off my bedroom light. My phone screen lit up in my hand, showed the call had connected. "Hello, 911? What's your emergency?" A dispatcher's voice crackled softly. Before I could form words, I peeked out the window again. The yard below was empty. Mr. Conway was gone. The storm doors now lay closed, the basement glow sealed away. Had he seen me? He must have. "Hello? Do you need assistance?" the dispatcher pressed. I swallowed hard, then quietly replied, I'm not sure. There's some strange activity at my neighbor's house." I proceeded to babble some half-coherent explanation about seeing my neighbor carrying a suspicious bundle into his basement. Even as I spoke, I regretted calling. If Mr. Conway was truly dangerous, alerting the police might provoke him. And if I was wrong, I'd forever ruined relations with the man next door by sending cops over on a wild assumption. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. They searched the yard with flashlights, knocked on his door, and eventually Mr. Conway emerged, appearing confused and sleepy. I watched from my darkened window as they talked to him. He even glanced in my direction once, and immediately looked at his face. After a short conversation, he left. One of the officers came to my door next. Embarrassed, I stepped outside to meet him. "Your neighbor says he was just doing some late-night cleaning and moved a rolled-up carpet into his basement. He allowed us to take a quick look around inside. We didn't see anything out of the ordinary," the officer reported, giving me a thin, annoyed smile. "Likely a misunderstanding. You should try to get some sleep, sir." I nodded apologetically. My cheeks burned. They thought I was crazy or high-strung. I muttered thanks and went back in, ears ringing with humiliation. Every Friday night, my house plays tricks on me. Time twists and stretches, shadows slither along the walls, and I feel eyes in the cellar watching my every move. It started with small oddities, little lapses in reality that I could ignore. But each week, the phenomena grow stronger, as if something in the house is testing me, toying with my sense of time and sanity. The first incident was a few Fridays ago. I was winding down in the living room with a book, waiting for the midnight news on TV. The digital clock on my mantle read 11:47 p.m. I remember that clearly because the next time I glanced up, the clock showed 3:19 a.m., yet I swear only a few minutes had passed. I felt disoriented, slightly sick. The television was showing nothing but static, hissing softly. At some point, I had apparently turned it off the news channel, though I didn't recall doing that. Confused and a bit unnerved, I shrugged it off as accidental dozing. Perhaps I'd fallen asleep without noticing. As I stood to head to bed, a movement caught my eye, a flicker of darkness in the hallway. I turned, and for an instant, I thought I saw a shadow at the far end by the basement door. It was indistinct, humanoid, just there at the edge of vision. I blinked, and it was gone. The hall was empty, the basement door shut as usual. Telling myself I was groggy, I double-checked the door's lock. It was indeed locked, and went upstairs to my bedroom. I'd almost forgotten the incident by the next morning. People lose track of time, especially late at night. It happens. I kept busy over the week, convincing myself it was nothing to worry about. And it might have ended there, if not for what happened the following Friday. That night, I was determined to stay alert. I brewed coffee in the evening and drank 2 cups, settling in at my desk to do some late paperwork for my job. At 10 p.m., I felt fine. At 11:30 p.m., I was still alert, scribbling notes. But sometime around midnight, I was overcome by the urge to shut my eyes, not out of tiredness exactly, as if I'd been drugged by an unseen hand of sleep. I remember shaking my head, standing up to walk around and shake it off. The next thing I knew, I was jerking awake in my kitchen, slumped at the table. The overhead light was off. I was sure I'd left it on. In the gloom, the kitchen clock ticked eerily loud. It read 2:40 a.m. My papers were scattered on the floor as if dropped. I had lost roughly 2 hours and had no memory of leaving my desk. Heart pounding, I stumbled through the downstairs rooms, flicking on lights. Everything looked normal until I reached the door to the basement. It stood wide open. That door is always kept closed. I'm almost obsessive about it because the basement has a tendency to draft cold air. yet now it yawned black and open, the darkness of the stairwell like a throat. A faint smell wafted up, the sharp, acrid scent of burnt wiring or ozone mixed with the earthy musk of the cellar. I hadn't been down there in weeks. Gathering my nerve, I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice sounded small. No answer, of course. With trembling fingers, I flicked the hallway light switch to illuminate the basement steps. The bulb at the top of the stairs came on, spilling a dim light partway down. The concrete floor at the bottom remained in darkness. I could just make out the edge of an old trunk and the furnace tank. Nothing moved, yet I had the strongest feeling that someone was standing just beyond the line of light, pressing against the wall or crouching under the stairs, trying not to be seen. A prickling sensation crawled up the back of my neck. I thought of the shadow I'd seen the week before. Was it down there now, watching from below? I took one step down, leaning to peer further. The weak light revealed only quivering shadows cast by the stair rail. I listened. The silence was thick, almost humming in my ears. Suddenly, the light bulb above me flickered and went out. I gasped, now plunged into darkness on the stairs. Instinctively, I turned and bolted back up to the hallway, slamming the basement door shut with a bang. My hands shook as I locked it. From the other side of the door, I thought I heard a soft sound, like a rustling or perhaps quiet laughter. I backed away, not daring to reopen that door to investigate. I left every light in the house on and spent the rest of that night curled up on my living room couch, jumpy at every creak and groan the house made. By morning, I'd half convinced myself it had been an electrical issue, the lights shorting, maybe a power blip affecting the clocks. Maybe I had sleepwalked under the stress of work. Any explanation, however far-fetched, felt better than considering the alternative, that something unexplainable was happening in my home. Over the next week, I found myself dreading the approach of Friday. I started marking days off on my calendar like a prisoner awaiting some dreaded appointment. I even bought a fancy digital clock known for accuracy, hoping that if something strange happened, at least that clock might shed light. I set it on my bedside table. Friday came once more. I spent the evening quietly, trying to act as if it were any other night, a movie on TV, some popcorn, attempting to relax. But as the hours ticked by, my eyes kept flicking to the time. 11 o'clock, 11:30, 11:45. I took a deep breath and told myself maybe this time nothing unusual would occur. At 11:55 p.m., a sudden drowsiness hit me, just like the previous week. It washed over me in an instant, making my limbs heavy and my thoughts foggy. I fought it, pacing circles in the living room. The last thing I recall was standing by the mantel clock, shaking my head and slapping my cheek to stay awake. I must have blacked out. When awareness returned, I found myself someplace utterly unexpected. I was outside, in the dark, standing barefoot in the wet grass of my backyard. The shock of cold mud between my toes snapped me fully awake. My heart was thunderous in my ears. How did I get here? The night was deathly quiet, except for a chorus of crickets and my own panicked breathing. Disoriented, I turned toward the house. The back door was wide open, swaying slightly as if it had been left ajar for some time. Dim light from the kitchen spilled out onto the steps. With a jolt, I realized I was standing only about 10 feet from the cellar bulkhead doors, the external access to the basement. They were shut, but one of them was subtly bouncing, as though something had just jarred it from underneath. A strangled cry escaped my throat. I stumbled backwards away from the cellar doors and nearly tripped. For a split second, I expected them to fly open in front of me. Instead, a different motion drew my gaze upward, the second-floor window of my bedroom. The light was on in my room. I could have sworn I turned everything off downstairs before whatever happened. But what froze me was the figure I saw standing at my bedroom window, looking down at me. It was a silhouette, backlit by the warm glow of the lamp in my room. I could make out no features, just a dark shape. For an instant, I thought someone had broken in and was now in my house. But the figure, it had the same build as me. In fact, it was standing exactly where I'd stand if I were peering out of my own bedroom window. My stomach lurched. Was I looking at my reflection? No, I was outside, and that was definitely someone inside, someone who in outline looked eerily like me. I started toward the house, adrenaline overriding my fear. The figure at the window didn't move, watching me approach. I ran up the back porch and through the open kitchen door, grabbing the nearest weapon-like object I could find, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove. Wielding it, I inched toward the stairs. The whole house was lit now. Every lamp I owned seemed to be on, including many I am sure I left off. The illumination chased away any hiding shadows, yet I felt no safer. "Who's here?" I called out, trying to sound authoritative despite the tremor in my voice. No answer. I climbed the stairs, skillet in hand, eyeing the doorway to my bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was half ajar, light spilling out. I was sure that I had left my bedroom light off earlier in the evening. The floorboards creaked softly under my feet as I edged forward. I nudged the bedroom door open with the skillet, then jumped back, heart pounding. No one lunged at me. I peered into the room. It was empty. No intruder. The lamp on my nightstand glowed, casting a comforting light on the bed and dresser. Everything looked perfectly normal and untouched. I checked the closet. Nothing. Under the bed, nothing but dust bunnies. The window was still open. I often cracked it for fresh air, and a faint breeze fluttered the curtain. I was shaking. I know what I saw. Someone was standing here. I leaned out the window, looking down at the yard where I'd stood moments ago. The grass where I awoke was trampled and muddied with my footprints. Could I have somehow been sleepwalking, run upstairs and looked out, and then run back down, all without memory? That seemed impossible. A sudden instinct made me whirl around, expecting to see someone right behind me. Of course, there was no one. But as I stood there, a subtle change came over the atmosphere of the house. The lamplight in the bedroom began to dim, as though an unseen hand was turning the knob down. In the hallway, I heard the click of the upstairs bathroom light turning off by itself. Darkness encroached, the only light now a weak glow from downstairs. My heart leapt into my throat. I stepped into the hall and nearly screamed. The shadows on the wall were moving. My own elongated shadow cast by the stairway light was stretching and twisting, contorting into an inhuman shape. It peeled itself away from the wall, breaking in two like ink dispersing in water. One half slithered along the wall toward the stairs, the other oozed across the ceiling above me. I stumbled back into the bedroom, slamming the door and throwing